next speaker. To say Phil has seen it all would be an understatement. The fact of the matter is, he was there. He's been immersed in it, and he's written about it for what most of us have known has been the history of Australian surfing. The reality is, Phil remains one of surfing's most respected observers and subscribers. He's been an executive at Quicksilver, and he's been an editor at some of the world's most respected surfing magazines, including Tracks in Australia and Surfing in the US. He's written about the man himself, Kelly Slater, and his books remain some of surfing's most respected and successful releases worldwide. And in his spare time, he just so happens to run one of the world's best and most enjoyable surfing festivals, the Noosa Festival of Surfing each year. He's told us the history of Australian surfing most recently. He's told us Quicksilver's story. He's told us how surf bums went to suits and Salton suits. But even if it's just the first layer tonight, he's going to tell us about what happened in that summer of 1914-1915. Ladies and gentlemen, some of you may know him as Phil Jarratt. For those of us who are readers of surfing magazines, we know him as the Grey Guru. So please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Phil Jarratt.
This is a very important community announcement. Members of the band, is it okay if I just put my glass down on your guitar case? I didn't hear any strenuous objections, so I presume that will be okay. But, you know, musos can, especially old ones, can get really gnarly. As Simon said, as he said everything that I was going to say tonight, yes, I was here in the summer of 1914-15, and there's been a lot of work since then, but you know, I'm still here, and Duke's not, so I guess I'll speak for both of us. You know, Freshwater was a very different place then, but it's just wonderful to think that as we come up to the centenary of that visit of 1914-15, that the community of Freshwater can join together like this to commemorate what was an event that really put surfing on the map. It made the world realise that Australia had surf and you could ride surfboards here, and it basically just culminated in an understanding of Australia as more than some bizarre place where black and white were loggerheads. I mean, we had the White Australia policy had just been introduced a few years before that. It was Australia for the white man, and Duke's visit really kind of put some attention, it focused people on the idea that our policies were ridiculous, and that this wonderful coloured man from Hawaii, this full-blood Hawaiian, carried so much of the spirit of Aloha with him. And that's a word we hear a lot, and we'll do more about that in a minute. But it was such an important moment in history, and it's just wonderful to see this place embrace that. And I also want to particularly pay tribute to the Freshwater Surf Club, and I know they're not quite the same entity, but the Duke's Day Committee, Simon, the two gnomes, and everybody else involved for doing such a wonderful job here in bringing the cultures together. And it's really sad that this freshwater situation where the surf club and the surfboard riders are so they've embraced the waterman ethic, and they're all working together. It's one of the few places in Australia where that is the case. Whereas in the United States, in Hawaii and in continental United States, it's the norm. You know, there are no distinctions. There is no, you know, go up the northern end of the beach. We don't want you surfing. You know, we don't want you surfing over here. We hate you guys. You know, you blah blah blah. You know, that thing that's been going on since the 60s and even before doesn't seem to exist here in Freshwater, and I think that's largely due to the fact that everybody. The freshwater locals are so committed to their own sense of history, and that's what I love about this place. This is I've been very fortunate in that a year ago I was able to, as part of Surfing Australia's 50th anniversary, I was able to launch my history of surfing in Australia here at this fabulous surf club, and I'm lucky enough to be invited back to launch my new book as part of your 99th anniversary of Duke's trip. Here, and my new book is what I'm going to be talking about in a minute, but it's basically it describes what happened that summer at Boomerang, and Boomerang just up the road there Lane Beachley, just up the hill there, as you know. Lane, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, she's waving. She's getting ready to go to the Big Bash. She was going to come tonight, but I think she's the girl in the cage that has to catch the ball, you know, at the Big Bash. Anyway, she sends her apologies. Also, Jack McCoy sends his apologies. I just had a text from him. He said he's got a bad back, but he asked me to say, Aloha. And I promise that is almost the last time I'll say Aloha tonight. Hang on. I'm a really short ass, so I've got to just my mic down here a bit. I just want to thank Steve Bennett and all the crew at Freshie. If you're wandering through the other room, the heritage room here, there's a video playing continuously. The volume's down now, but it'll be back up a little bit later. And that sort of describes this book, That Summer of Boomerang. And Steve and Eric and George and everybody here at the club enabled me to come and do a shoot to create this video, walking around the club, walking around the beach, up at the statue, up at the other end. It enabled me to sort of talk people through the importance of Duke Kahanamoku's visit here 99 years ago. So thank you for the access, you guys, and thank you for continuing to remember how important this event was. I also want to pay tribute to some of the greats of the surfboard industry, some of the pioneers of the surfboard industry who are here tonight. And I didn't realise that they would all be here, but it's just wonderful. I mean, some of them come as far as, from Manly. I don't think Barry Bennett's been over the hill for a long time. And I don't mean that he's over the hill. He hasn't come over the hill. Barry Bennett, one of the fabulous pioneers of the surfboard industry, is here tonight. As is the great Gordon Woods, and the significant contribution that both those guys have made over so many years should never be underestimated. But also, Denny Keogh is here tonight, and Denny has just been, he was just telling me this before, we're going to do something at Noosa in March about this to commemorate it. But he's been inducted into the International Surfboard Builders Hall of Fame in California. And it's wonderful to see these guys who are now getting a bit long in the tooth, but they're still active and they're still loving the surf lifestyle and the surf culture, and they're all here tonight. And without them, we wouldn't be riding the boards we're riding today, because they were the genesis of the industry. So please give them a big hand. And also, I shouldn't forget my old mate Ray Moran, who was part of that era, part of that school. And he too was here in the summer of 1914-15 when Duke and I rode tandem over the As Simon said, Duke wasn't the first, but he made Australians aware of surfboard riding in a way that hadn't been done to that point. I mean, there were, to be honest, there were probably 50 people who could stand up on a surfboard in Australia prior to the summer of 1914-15. There were perhaps 20 or 30 surfboards, most of which had been imported by merchant seamen or somebody who went on the hugely extravagant Pacific Islands holiday. In those days it cost you, a year's salary to go to get a Matson liner or to Hawaii, and I mean not many people did it, and they were usually company directors or whatever. And as a consequence, they would perhaps buy a redwood surfboard and bring it back to Australia, but they didn't know what to do with it. And as a consequence of that, at least one of these boards that we know about from the history ended up being an ironing board. And we had a couple of surfers who were of consequence before Duke arrived, and the one we all know about is Tommy Walker, and he was significant for a number of reasons. He could stand on his head when nobody knew that he could do that on board, and he did it often. And it was a good enough trick for him to win the surfboard display contest here at Freshwater, and also I think the first one at DY. There are enough historians here who are going to pick me up on this if I get it wrong, but certainly he was acknowledged as Sydney's best surfer, and probably ergo Australia's best surfer in the pre-Duke era. And he had a board that he picked up for $2 on the wharf at Honolulu because he was a merchant seaman. And he also worked in the sugar mill at Yamba. And he would get up the coast for a few months every year and surf in Yamba. And that's where Ray Moran comes from, and he's got a special interest in that era. And my good friend Bob McCavish has also been exploring the history of the Tommy Walker surfing pre-Duke. But when Duke came, he changed everything because he made us aware of this sport, and he made the world aware that this was a surfing nation, that you could go surfing here, and that we had a lot of coastline, and it was an interesting potential. Of course, the underside of that was that we were Australia's best young men were all being herded off to fight a war in Europe. And over the next 4 years, so many of the people who actually were inspired by Duke's visit to Australia didn't come back from the fields of France or Gallipoli. And I think, that underlying poignancy, that sadness about that period is something that makes it sort of ring for me. It's one of the most important surfing stories that hasn't really been told in its entirety until now. I hope I've done that with my book, and I hope you buy my book. It's only $30 and it's on sale at the front. But I believe that the Duke story is only part of it, because the Freshwater story is an important part of this whole package as well. Just to very briefly recap on Hawaiian surf history. Duke represented the new era, if you like, the post-missionary prohibition. And some of you will be very familiar with this, so I'm very brief. But for about 80 years, surfing, which had been part of the pagan rites, well, this is what the missionaries called the pagan rites, had been a quasi-religious experience in Hawaii and in the islands of Polynesia for people to ride surfboards. And they rode them naked, and sometimes they rode these big surfboards with their women folk, also naked. And missionaries looked at this and they went, no, you can't be doing this, because like dancing, this could lead to sex. And so they, even though they had no right to do so, they effectively forced a prohibition of surfing. And for about 60, 70, 80 years, there was no surfing in Hawaii. You were not, you could go out there, but you're going to be, frowned upon by everybody in your village society. So it virtually disappeared. And then in about 1880, the enlightened King David Kalakaua reigned in the Hawaiian monarchy, and he said, no, this is, and he was a good buddy of Robert Louis Stevenson, the author, who was a wild boy, and David Kalakaua loved to sit down and drink a bottle of red wine or a bottle of port with Robert Louis Stevenson, and there are a few photos still in existence of them doing so. They loved the luau and a bottle of red. Go figure. Anyway, David Kalakaua did not surf himself, but he was a rebel, and he just went, no, bugger this. These people come here and they tell us we can't go surfing. We want, we like to drink wine. We have sex. We have fun. We're islanders. And so he just said, no, there's no prohibition. Everybody can go surfing. Everybody go surf. And from about 1885, that's what happened. And Duke, who was born in 1890, was part of that new era of surfing in Hawaii, which I think is wonderful that he was at the forefront. And by the time he got here in 1914, 15, it was surfing in Hawaii was a major force, and he sort of brought that whole energy of this great sport and this great culture to Australia at that time. Now, Simon earlier on was talking about the board in there, that fabulous piece of history, and he said it's 8:10. I think it's 8:08, but yes. Whatever. It's 8:06. Okay, well, yeah, thanks, Jeff Taylor. We've got all the history. I told you I'd be corrected on just about everything I said. Well, these guys know. I'm a popular historian. These guys cross every T and dot every I. That board is the board that Duke rode out here with Isabel Letham. And I've always been intrigued by the idea that maybe there was a little kind of romance there. I don't know. I mean, she was 15, he was 25. And in those days, it would have been an entirely criminal idea, but there was a sparkle, and if you've ever seen footage of Isabel in later years talking about Duke, the sparkle continued. He didn't get married until he was 50. She never got married. She travelled the world looking for Duke or somebody like him. There's something going on, and I think it all goes back. It all goes back to trying to ride tandem on an 8'8" surfboard, and Simon and Chuck Inman will know better than anybody else that that leads to a fairly intimate paddle out. I'm not going to be too graphic because I know there are children here. And Lane is listening from up on the hill. But it seems to me that there is the potential there for, if not romance in the true sense, then romance in the idea of a man and a woman riding waves together. It was kind of, I love the idea of that period, and that for me that was one of the elements that made it so attractive. I also love the idea of the birth of leisure in Australia at that time, because in the 1890s, and also in Hawaii, we were pretty similar circumstances. In the 1890s, Hawaii lost its monarchy. The Americans took over. It became, not a territory immediately, but it was on its way to becoming a territory, and then 50 years later a state. But basically, the Americans took over running of the islands, and the monarchy existed in name only, and the whole place kind of had a gear change, gear shift. Then in Australia, we had depression, we had shearer strikes, we had a drought, the worst drought in memory, and life was not good. Life was really tough for everybody in the 1890s. And then at the dawn of the new century, with federation, suddenly all these things started to happen. One of them was that motor cars became available for the first time, and people could actually move around. You could afford to buy a car, or even if somebody you knew had a car, you could all get together and jump on the old T-Model Ford and head out to Freshwater for a weekend at the beach. It'd take you about half a day to get here because there were 2 ferries involved. But, also the cinema had just started. You could go and watch a Chaplin movie in George Street in Sydney. Vaudeville, there were clubs everywhere, there were dancing girls, and most importantly, ocean bathing had just become legal. Daylight ocean bathing had become legal. So the beach was a focus for our leisure. And so I love the idea that all that happened, and then World War I started in 1914, in September 1914, August 1914, and it started to unravel. But Duke came right at the end of that period. In the book I call it the period when Fun was young. And it was a lot about the building of our nation, and it was a lot more about the building of our character. And Duke Kahanamoku certainly was a part of that process. Duke himself, and I've been fascinated with Duke since I was a very little boy. He's had, I think, 4 biographies. A lot of books have written about Duke, but a lot of authors have written about Duke. But four biographies, and Joe Brennan, who was an old buddy of his, a contemporary, a sports writer, he wrote the first one in 1968, just around the time that Duke died. Sandy Hall, who some of you here at Freshwater will know, Sandra Kimberly Hall, great lady, lives in Honolulu, has done for many, many years, was a friend of Nadine, Duke's widow, and is from Freshwater. She's written 2 books, and she has so much research that I know she's got another one she hopes to get published in the near future, and she's a great Duke historian. More recently, a guy called James Nendel, who is a famous footballer, amateur footballer in America, college footballer, and an academic. He has written an unpublished, well, you can get it online, it's called 20th Century Monarch, Duke Kahanamoku, 20th Century Monarch, and that is probably the most comprehensive work on Duke that's been done. But I read all that stuff, and while I thought it was admirable and wonderful in many ways, it didn't give me a sense of who Duke was, you know. He's always been presented as this kind of 2-dimensional God figure, you know. Can he really have been perfect? Can he really have been? I mean, he was a Waikiki beach boy, for God's sake. And so in my research, I tried to find elements to his character that would humanise him, that would make people understand who he was. And I'm sure a lot of people here have met Hawaiians who fit the mould of the Waikiki Beach Boy. Well, Duke was the one who actually started the mould, more or less. There were other guys around at the same time, but Duke really kind of was a picture of the Waikiki Beach Boy. And in the annals of oral history at the University of Hawaii, and also in the private archives of the Outrigger Canoe Club, there are transcripts of interview with Duke's brothers, not with Duke, but with Duke's brothers, Sam and Lewis Kahanamoku, and they talk about their lives as beach boys. And these guys were, they were having fun, because that's what surfing's all about. They had this thing called kokua de sisters, which means help the sisters. And that meant when the boat came in with all the pretty young girls on, you paddle out to meet them, and you grab a girl and you put her on your board, and you would paddle her into a few waves, and then later on in the afternoon you'd sit under the palm trees, and you'd drink a couple of beers, you'd play a bit of ukulele, and you would romance her a little bit, and maybe there'd be a couple or something like that, before you took her back to the boat. And this went on day in, day out. That was the culture. So don't tell me Duke never had sex. When he married at 50, he was... I don't want to dwell on sex, but we know what they were like, and we know what surfers are like. It's about fun. It's about living a lifestyle that all of us here, I think 98% of us are baby boomers looking around the room. Sorry, kids. And we understand that was the origins of the surf culture in Australia. It's about riding waves. It's about living a life without too many restrictions and having a hell of a good time. And that's the way I've depicted Duke in this book. There's absolutely zero disrespect, because he's been a hero of mine since I was a very, very young surfer. And I wanted people to have the opportunity to understand who this guy was and what might have happened when he was here in Freshwater, what might have happened wherever he was in all parts of the world, demonstrating the surfing lifestyle, the surfing culture and the sport, which he did for very many years. And in that, I guess I'm probably going to offend this thing that's developed over recent years, particularly since Duke's death in 1968, which is a kind of a protection society. For example, the little bar out the front here that's called Duke's Bar. I believe that would have had to have been approved by Malam Pono, which is part of the Duke Protection Society. And I don't have any problems with that. I think that's good that they should protect the brand of Duke Kahanamoku. He should not be appearing on bus sides, or he should not have nightclubs in his name all over the world. I think that's good to keep him commercially clean. But he was a famous figure in history, and I really dislike the idea that we can't research and write about Duke without offending the idea of Duke that nobody really can sustain. History shows otherwise. History shows that Duke was a surfer, a beach boy, and a real person. And without offending any of our good friends in the Outrigger Canoe Club or the Bishop Museum in Hawaii, both of whom were very helpful in my production of this book, I hope that what I've been able to present is a true, legitimate picture of Duke Kahanamoku, what he meant to the history of surfing, what his visit to Freshwater and his demonstrations of surfing here meant to our whole culture, and how we feel about that 100 years later. I hope I've been able to do that without any questions about my reverence for Duke Kahanamoku, for Isabel Letham, and all those wonderful characters who peopled this whole little valley 100 years ago and make it such a very special part of Australian surfing and beach lifestyle history. In closing, I'd just like to say that although I wasn't here last year, I heard that my good friend Jack McCoy pulled the rabbit out of the hat and had everybody spellbound when he produced Duke's card. Well, as much as I love Jack, look, I got to tell you, Duke gave me this when I was 5 years old.
Wow. My God.
No, he didn't. It's a bubblegum car. But I bought it at auction, at Randy Rarick's auction in Honolulu, along with a whole bunch of other Duke artifacts, quite a few years ago now. And it's something I really love, you know. And every time when I was writing this book and I hit the wall, I look at the bubblegum card. You know, when I was having trouble getting to the next little bit, I look at Duke's bubblegum card and go, yeah, okay, I kind of I get where he's coming from. And in closing, when I was debating with myself about how far I could go in portraying Duke as a real person, I had lunch with an old friend of mine called Fred Hemmings, who was the 1968 World Surfing Champion, former Red Party senator. And I'm a Blue Party guy, but we were able to talk. He was the senator for Hawaii. He was also the captain of the Outrigger Canoe Club of Honolulu, and he's one of the most notable Hawaiians. And he's also known in the early days of pro surfing as Dead-Ahead Fred, because when Fred said, "This is the way it is, this is the way it is," and he was a former footballer. He punched the lights out as soon as look at him. He's a tough guy. So I sat down and we've had our fights over the years, but I sat down and had lunch with him one day and explained how I portrayed Duke. And I said, "Fred, would you have any problems with that?" And I read him some excerpts and everything. And he said, "Hell no! He's a frickin' beach boy." And I think that's really what it's all about. He's a frickin' beach boy. He's a god, yeah. He's revered, yeah. But he's a beach boy. He came up with the idea, and we've all followed. And I think it's wonderful that here in Freshwater, this community is still following. Thank you very much.